Series 5 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Leslie Cara and my co-host is Lauren North.
Hello and welcome to our Minisodes episodes with writer and psychologist Philippa East. Hello, Philippa.
Hello.
Philippa is the author of psychological suspense novels Little White Lies, which was shortlisted for the CWA New Blood Dagger Award, and her latest release, Safe and Sound. Alongside her writing, Philippa works as a clinical psychologist. So each of these episodes is going to be about 10 minutes long and focuses on the issues that most of us face at some point during our writing life. So let's get cracking.
Welcome to our third Minisode. Today we're talking to Philippa East about coping with public speaking and networking events, something that while authors don't do on a day-to-day basis, most of us at some point will find ourselves attending and, doing a book launch with other authors or on our own. And so this is a great episode for somebody who struggles with nerves about public speaking or being sort of on display in front of people.
Absolutely. And as you say, it isn't day to day because most of the time we are just sat at our desks alone. And so that can, I think, exacerbate any nerves you do have then about going out. It can just be so daunting, I think, for so many of us. And I think something that's been even exposed a lot more through the lockdowns because we've then really shut ourselves off. So Philippa, thank you for joining us again. My question is, so humans are generally considered to be sociable animals. So why is it that some of us struggle more than others, or some of us struggle sometimes and not others, with attending events where we've got to talk to other people and even like talk in front of other people as well?
I think it's a really good question. I think, there's this general sort of sense that as humans, we are sociable. I mean, we don't live as hermits. We do generally live in communities and societies, and we have done for thousands and thousands of years. But I think that in terms of, social events, social interactions and why they can be stressful, I actually think there's two slightly separate things that are going on here that is useful to maybe separate out. One is, I think, the personality trait of introversion. Introversion is the opposite of extroversion. And that's something slightly different from the pressure or the anxiety that we might feel in a social situation where we're anxious about talking to people, or we're having to give some sort of presentation or be kind of the center of attention in at a panel or something like that. And those two things can overlap a little bit and connect, but they're actually two separate things. So for example, I'm generally very confident with public speaking and generally kind of with social interactions, talking to somebody at a party or whatever, but I'm a huge introvert. And people sometimes misunderstand what introversion is. They can think it's a sort of form of social anxiety or shyness, and it's that people are just feeling anxious in social situations. But actually it is quite different. It's basically this idea that introverts can be very capable with social interaction, very confident, but they find it draining, that their physical, emotional, and mental energy is drained by social interaction. And that's the different to extroverts, who generally are kind of enlivened and energized. The way that introverts recharge is being on their own. And when they don't get that time on their own, they can become sort of frazzled and stressed, and it can become quite difficult. So I think lots of authors are introverts because I think there's a number of reasons. One is writing, like you say, is a pretty solitary profession. And if you can't deal with your own company and being alone for long stretches, you probably aren't going to enjoy being a writer. Also, I think introverts can often be quite good observers because they're not always kind of throwing themselves right in the middle and being the kind of performer or talker at a social event. They're often very observant, and we know that being very observant is great for writers. So one part of it, I think, is introversion, which is simply that it's very effortful and draining and tiring to be in social contact with people for a lot of writers. Not all writers. Some writers, of course, are extroverts, and lots of people are kind of in the middle as well. And then the second thing is more the sort of anxieties that come with things like public speaking. And if you think about what public speaking is, it's basically standing in the middle of the town square and having the whole community judge you and watch you. And again, as humans, that's something that we find very stressful. It's very exposing, because fundamentally, if your community judges you negatively, they can chuck you out of the tribe and you will die in the wilderness by yourself. So again, it comes back to, in our brains, life or death. So at some level, when we get up and give a presentation to an audience, little part of our brain is going, if I get this wrong, I could die. So again, it's very easy for that to trigger anxiety. And then if we think about networking events, they can potentially combine both. There's the kind of challenge for an introvert of just getting out and socializing and the kind of energy that takes, but also trying to, talk to people that you may not know and feel that you're being judged and wanting to make a good impression. It ties in with that kind of anxiety about our community judging us and the fear of ostracism. So a lot to contend with.
Yes, that's really interesting. And I really identify with some of those things, because I'm an introvert as well, but I always describe myself as a gregarious introvert, because I don't mind public speaking and I'm quite sort of happy to do that. But as you say, I do find it draining and I need my own company afterwards to sort of recover. Of course, I was lucky because I used to be a teacher, and so any nerves I had about standing in front of people were kind of ironed out during teacher training, when you have to sort of stand up and do teaching in front of people and be assessed and everything. So I think it also depends on what your previous job was, how much confidence you've got at standing up. But I was wondering, if an author knows that they've got an event coming up, what are some of the things that they can do to prepare for this and make sure that it goes as well as it can go?
Yeah, so again, I think it probably depends a little bit on the type of event. If it's an event that's going to be challenging for you in terms of introversion, there's certain things that would help with that. If it's an event that's potentially going to be challenging in terms of anxiety about social anxiety or anxiety about public speaking, that's going to be slightly different as well. So on the introvert side, I have to think about this a lot, because as I say, I'm a massive introvert, and I've kind of learned over the years what's helped. One of the like easiest ways to know if you're an introvert or not is to ask yourself, have you ever been at a party for a long time and you've just had to go and take a time out in the toilets? Classic introvert behavior, basically. And I used to do this and never understood why, but it's basically just, we're just needing to get this time out on our own. So what I would generally say is you can prepare and try and set things up so that you will have these timeouts during an event. And that can be, you just be going to the toilet and sit in a cubicle for like 10 minutes and just be on your own. Like, you can do that, or pretend that you just have to slip out and take a phone call, that kind of stuff. Sometimes I say to people, it's okay if you want to leave an event early, you can just call a halt at 9:30, and even if other people are going to be going on, if your battery's pretty drained at that point, just call it an early night. You can make an excuse about feeding the dog or whatever you need to do. So I always say just make up excuses, or even just tell people that you're an introvert and you have to go home now. So I think, yeah, just kind of knowing that if you're going to be in a social setting for an extended period, just try and put some practical things in so you can get away, that you can have that alone time, knowing that that's what you're going to need as an introvert. And also planning, like you say, Leslie, that recuperation time afterwards. If you've got a big event on one day, try and make sure that you've got breathing space and alone time and a quiet day the next day. It's not always possible, but not expecting that you can just go from one social event to another just because other people can. Introverts don't do that well. The same way, if you told an extrovert to sit alone at home for 4 days straight, they would go nuts. So they need, it's all right, it's just how we're built. I think in terms of, like network events and things, if we're kind of nervous about meeting new people, talking to new people, maybe you guys, I think you probably do this, try and see if there's someone that that you can meet up with beforehand. There might be someone you've connected with on Twitter even, that you could just, meet them at the train station before you go. So you've got a little wing buddy with you and that kind of thing. The other thing that I think is a really useful tip when we're at these kind of social gatherings where it's kind of standing around in groups and chit-chatting, and when you have social anxiety, you can feel a lot of pressure as to, what am I going to say? I have to, contribute. I have to make a good impression. Actually, in group conversation, the role of someone who's just present but listening is a really important role, and people don't always think about it, but they value that role. We need listeners in the group just as much as we need talkers, because if everyone was talking or someone was talking, no one's listening, I mean, that's going to fall apart pretty quickly. So you can just say to yourself, you know what, I don't have to be the talker. I can just be, and lots of authors are really good at this, I can be a really good observer. I can be a really good listener. And just, again, if you don't know what to say, you can always ask the other person about themselves, and that usually get them off talking. And again, not putting all the pressure on yourself to be the one to drive the conversation or hold the conversation up. Just chuck that on someone else in the group who's happier to talk. And then in terms of things like, author events like panels or giving a talk, I think the first thing to say is actually, if you're not comfortable with that kind of promo, you don't have to do it. I mean, I know that there can be a lot of pressure because it can be a good way to get out there, but if it's something that's really going to stress you out and it's just going to make you miserable having those kind of events, it's okay not to have to do it. And I think, other little things that can help maybe make it, if you are going to do something like that, making it feel a little bit less pressurized, is maybe like, I never do the thing where I just stand and give a talk about myself, because I think that's really hard. And you can feel like a bit of a muppet just being like, I'm an author and I'm brilliant and buy my books. And so what I often try and arrange is to have someone interview me so that they're the one asking the questions and it's more conversational and I don't feel so much pressure to be the big entertainer. Or, if you're doing something like a book launch, you don't have to give a speech. You could get a friend to just give a speech on your behalf. So any ways that you can, reduce how much time you spend in the limelight or how much responsibilities on yourself, even if you're still going to be present and, show up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant advice. Yeah, I really like that advice. I think some really useful things. But let's say that I've done my prep and I've done everything I can, and then I've gone to an event, I'm on a panel, and there's way more people than I was expecting, and I thought I was going to be okay, and I'm not, and I'm backstage, and I haven't got time to go and have a timeout, and I'm really nervous. Is there like a quick fix? Have you got any useful quick fixes for anyone who just really gets hit with that anxiety when they're at a networking event or a panel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is really difficult, I think this might not be possible, like you say, if you're literally about to go on, but if there's any chance of saying to the organizer, look, can you just give me 5 minutes? Like, do we have any kind of breathing space here? Because I think then if you can just, it can help just to be able to get away from if you're like literally standing at the edge of the stage, that's a pretty triggering place to be. And again, my sort of thing is always like, get to the toilet, like the cubicle in a toilet is your friend. It's not the most pleasant place. And there might be somewhere else that you can go that's also a quiet space, but usually there's a toilet. So one thing might be, if you can say to the organizer, look, can I just have a couple of minutes just to compose myself? I mean, they're not going to want you going on in a tiz, but that of course might not be possible, or in the moment you just might not feel able to ask. It's quite an assertive thing to have to do. But I think if that's not possible and you're really on the spot, I think the thing to focus on most is techniques to calm the body down, because when we're super anxious, our body will have gone into basically threat mode, like fight, flight, freeze mode, which when we're in that mode, our cognitive abilities, our abilities to reason, our abilities to verbalize, our abilities to reflect, our abilities to self-soothe are massively compromised. Because again, going back to evolutionary psychology, if a lion is about to jump on you, you don't want to be thinking, what species of lion is that? And what's the velocity of the movement? That needs to all shut down so your body is just able to, run away or do whatever it needs. So, when we're in a high state of anxiety, our mental process are just completely buggered, basically. And all we've got is a fear response in the body. So if we can focus on some basic techniques to just try and calm the body down, and that can be simple as just get the breathing slowed down, deep breaths, exhaling, getting the carbon dioxide out of your system, because that just helps flush out some of that adrenaline. Sometimes just really paying attention to try and relaxing the muscles. We get into that when we're in that threat mode, we're really tense because it's the fight or flight response. So just trying to relax those muscles. which again will give feedback signals to the brain. It's okay, it's all right, there isn't a threat. So we can basically do things in the body to give safety messages to the brain, because trying to reason our way into a sense of calm is very difficult to do in that moment. So just body, body, body. And the other thing that you can do, again, which is a body move, is a way of kind of feeding a sense of confidence to your brain rather than terror, is what we call power poses, which is standing in a position which in the animal world is a position of dominance. Exactly, Leslie. So I will give you some examples. So it's basically poses which take up space, because that's dominance in the animal kingdom. So it's a wide stance with our, we can put hands on our hips, which is kind of like this. Legs, you can't see my legs, but legs apart, rather than this position, which is the I'm a victim, I'm prey, please don't eat me pose. And if it's not too obvious, you can even do like you can do this in the toilet, like literally like this. But even if you're standing at the edge of the stage waiting to go on, if you're standing like this, no one's going to think that looks weird. But already you're just giving your brain the information. I can do this. I'm in charge. I'm in control. I'm all right. I'm not under threat. I'm not a target here. So some really simple things that maybe you can do that just calm the system down a little bit.
Fantastic advice.
That is such good advice. Actually, there is, just to let people know, there is a podcast and a book called How to Own the Room. I don't know if any of you have come across it, by Viv Groskop, which is about sort of getting over fears of public speaking and how to own the room, or, wherever you happen to be. And, lots of those things that Philippa has just been talking about. She mentions as well. And what you were saying earlier, Philippa, about being a good listener in a group, that can also help when you're on a panel as well, because I think sometimes the fear, we're so worried about what we're going to say next that we actually sometimes don't listen to what the other panel members are saying, and that can be really embarrassing. So that listening and just enjoying what's happening can actually make you calm down as well. So brilliant.
And maybe if you listen to the other panelists, when it comes to your turn, you can just be like, oh, I just thought that the point that Leslie made was absolutely spot on. I would just agree with everything that she said.
I'm gonna use that for our event, Leslie, in February.
But also what you were saying earlier, Laurie, about people on Twitter and online, reach out if anyone's sort of nervous about doing something and they know they've got an event coming up or a book launch coming up where they've got to speak or say something. Let people know online, and people will support you. People will either give you advice or they'll come along to the event. And, that's how Laurie and I met, isn't it? At an event. You came to my book launch, didn't you? So. Sadly, that's all we've got time for. So thank you for listening to our minisode with psychologist Philippa East. Philippa writes novels that really put the psychological into psychological suspense. And you can find a link to both of her novels, Little White Lies and Safe and Sound, in the description. Do check them out because they're absolutely fabulous books. And thank you so much, Philippa, for giving us your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And if you haven't listened to already, then do look at Philippa's full In Suspense interview, which is on author wellbeing, which is series 4, episode 3.
So that's it from us. It's goodbye from Philippa.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from them.